The Devourer swarm blotted out the stars around Vithara as millions of mechanical ships approached the planet. In perfect formation, Jake stood on the bridge of the flagship watching the enemy fleet through the viewing screens and felt fear unlike anything he had ever experienced. Queen Aliana made the difficult decision to evacuate all civilians to the colony ship New Horizon, which had been transformed into an Ark using combined human and Viridian technology. The ship could carry both species to safety if the battle was lost, but someone had to stay behind to buy time for the evacuation. Commander Ashley Price led the human fighter squadrons, while Viridian dragon riders formed up alongside them. The sight of human ships flying in formation with dragons was something that no one had ever imagined possible just months ago. Jake climbed onto Shadowfang's back and felt the familiar surge of connection as their minds linked together. Queen Ileana joined them on her own mount, and the three beings prepared to lead the defense of their new home. The psychic bond between them hummed with power. The first wave of devourers struck the outer defenses with overwhelming force. Mechanical creatures the size of battleships tore through both human and Viridian ships like they were made of paper. The combined fleet fell back toward the planet as casualties mounted rapidly. Jake discovered that his connection to Queen Aliana and Shadowfang allowed them to coordinate their attacks with perfect precision. They moved as one being, striking at enemy weak points and covering each other during tactical retreats. The human pilots were amazed by the effectiveness of the three-way bond. Commander Ashley Price found herself following Jake's lead as he guided the mixed fighter squadrons through impossible maneuvers that no single pilot could have accomplished. Alone, Shadowfang breathed silver fire that seemed to burn hotter than normal, while Jake channeled power through their bond. The dragon responded to thoughts rather than commands, allowing them to react instantly to changing battle conditions. Queen Aliana used her ancient magic to create barriers of pure energy that protected the fleeing civilian ships. The strain of maintaining such powerful defenses was enormous, but the psychic link with Jake allowed her to draw on his strength as well as her own. The evacuation proceeded slowly, as thousands of humans and Viridians crowded aboard the New Horizon. Captain Morgan coordinated the loading while Engineer Lisa Park and Dr. Rebecca Stone made final preparations for departure. The Devourer command ships finally revealed themselves massive mechanical constructs that dwarfed even the largest human battleships. These creatures were the brain of the swarm and directed the smaller units with perfect efficiency. Jake realized that destroying the command ships might disrupt the entire swarm, but they were protected by energy shields that had never been penetrated. In centuries of warfare, the mechanical creatures seemed impossible to defeat using conventional weapons as the battle reached its climax. Jake felt the psychic bond with Queen Ileana and Shadowfang growing stronger. The three beings were pushing their connection beyond all safe limits, but it was their only chance to find a way to hurt the Devourers. The young soldier made a desperate decision and began channeling all of his enhanced life force through the bond to create a massive energy pulse. Queen Aliana and Shadowfang joined him, pouring their own power into the attack, despite the terrible risk. The feedback from the psychic overload threatened to destroy all three of them, but Jake pushed harder, knowing that this was their only chance to save both species. The power building between them was unlike anything seen before in the galaxy. The energy pulse erupted from their joined minds and struck the nearest Devourer command ship with the force of a small star. The mechanical creature's shields collapsed and the massive construct began breaking apart as systems overloaded throughout its structure. The destruction of the first command ship sent shockwaves through the entire Devourer swarm. Other mechanical units began firing randomly as their coordination network collapsed. Jake realized that they had found the enemy's weakness. Queen Ileana and Shadowfang were unconscious from the psychic backlash, but still alive. Jake himself was barely conscious as he guided the dragon toward the next command ship. The bond between them was damaged but still functional. The combined human and Viridian fleets rallied around them as word spread that the Devourers could be defeated. Pilots who had been ready to die and hopeless battle now pressed their attacks with renewed determination. Jake managed to destroy 2 more command ships before his strength finally gave out. The psychic overload had pushed him beyond all limits, and he collapsed onto Shadowfang's back as darkness closed in around him. The remaining Devourer ships began retreating as their command structure fell apart. Without the guidance of the control vessels, the mechanical swarm lost its coordination and became vulnerable to conventional attacks. Commander Ashley Price led the pursuit as human and Viridian forces destroyed the fleeing enemy ships. The battle that had seemed hopeless just hours ago was turning into a complete victory for the Alliance. When Jake woke up, he found himself in the medical bay of the New Horizon with Queen Aliana and Shadowfang nearby. All three of them had survived the psychic overload, but they were forever changed by the experience. The evacuation ships had returned to Vithara as word spread that the Devourer threat had been broken. Scattered enemy units still roamed the galaxy, but the main swarm was destroyed and could no longer threaten entire worlds' queen. Aliana announced that humans and Viridians would establish a joint colony on Vithara, where both species could live and work together. The alliance forged in battle would become the foundation for a new civilization. Jake found himself appointed as the first human ambassador to the Viridian Empire while also serving as a military advisor. The young soldier who had crashed on an alien world was now helping to shape the future of two species. Months later, Jake stood in the gardens of the new joint colony, watching human children play alongside young Viridians. The sight filled him with hope for the future as he realized that their sacrifice had created something beautiful. Shadowfang soared overhead carrying Corporal Nina Hayes, who had become the first human to train as a dragon rider. The ancient creature had accepted her as his second human partner, showing that the bonds between species could grow stronger. Queen Ileana joined Jake in the garden, and they watched together as their two peoples built a new world. The love that had grown between them during the war had become the symbol of cooperation between humans and Viridians. The galaxy was safe from the Devourer threat, and a new age of peace was beginning. Jake knew that there would be challenges ahead, but he was confident that humans and Viridians could face them, together as partners and friends. The bond between Jake and Shadowfang grew stronger with each passing day. The ancient dragon would follow the young human everywhere and seemed to understand his thoughts without words being spoken. Queen Aliana watched this development with fascination, because nothing like it had ever happened before. Jake discovered that riding Shadowfang into battle was like becoming part of the dragon himself. He could sense the creature's thoughts and emotions, while the dragon responded to his unspoken commands. The two moved together as if they had been partners for centuries instead of just weeks. The other Viridians were amazed by this unprecedented bond. Dragons were sacred creatures that chose their own riders, and Shadowfang had been bonded only to Queen Aliana for over 1,000 years. The fact that he accepted Jake as a second rider was seen as a powerful omen kernel. Beth Turner arrived from the human command structure to question the alliance with the aliens. She was suspicious of Queen Aliana and worried that the humans were being manipulated into serving Viridian interests. The colonel demanded to speak with Jake privately. Jake tried to explain the Devourer threat to Colonel Turner, but she remained skeptical of everything the aliens had told them. She believed that the Viridians were using fear tactics to make humans surrender their independence and serve as soldiers in an alien war. The debate between Jake and Colonel Turner was interrupted when Devourer scouts attacked a mining facility on one of Vithara's moons. The combined human and Viridian forces responded immediately, with Jake and Queen Aliana leading the counterattack together. During the battle, Queen Aliana was struck by a Devourer energy weapon and fell from her dragon toward the surface of the moon. Jake saw her falling and dove Shadowfang into a desperate rescue attempt. The dragon caught his queen just before she hit the ground, but she was badly injured. Jake felt the queen's pain through their growing psychic connection and was amazed by the intensity of his emotional response. He realized that his feelings for her had grown far beyond mere alliance or friendship. Something deeper was developing between them. Queen Ileana was taken to the palace medical chambers where Viridian healers worked desperately to save her life. The weapon that had struck her was designed to disrupt the life force itself, and conventional medicine could not help her against all tradition and law. Jake demanded to see the ancient healing chambers that were forbidden to all except members of the royal bloodline. The Viridian guards tried to stop him, but Shadowfang stood beside the young human and would not let anyone pass. The dragon led Jake to a chamber deep within the palace where crystals pulsed with the accumulated life force of centuries of Viridian rulers. Queen Eliana lay unconscious in the center, surrounded by floating gems that monitored her vital signs. Jake placed his hands on the healing crystals and felt power flowing through him that he did not understand. The crystals responded to his touch in ways that shocked the Viridian healers who had never seen a non-Viridian able to use their technology. The healing process took 3 days, during which Jake never left the Queen's side. He poured his own life force into the crystals to help sustain her, while her body fought off the effects of the Devourer weapon. The strain nearly killed him, but he refused to stop when Queen Eliana finally woke. She found Jake collapsed beside her bed, pale and weak from the effort of saving her life. She used her own recovered strength to heal him, and in the process their psychic connection became permanent and unbreakable. The healing had changed both of them. Jake now possessed enhanced physical abilities and could sense the thoughts and emotions of both the Queen and Shadowfang. The three beings had become connected in ways that had never been seen before in Viridian history. Colonel Turner and Viridian General Thaloran both questioned whether their leaders were making decisions based on logic or emotion. The unprecedented bond between Jake and Queen Eliana was creating tension among both species, who worried about divided loyalties. The Devourer main fleet entered the system just as Jake was recovering from the healing process. Long-range sensors showed millions of mechanical ships approaching at incredible speed. The enemy force was larger than anything the Viridians had ever faced. Queen Eliana called for an emergency meeting of all human and Viridian commanders to plan their defense strategy. The combined fleets would make their stand at Vithara because there was nowhere left to run. The approaching swarm had cut off all escape routes. Jake found himself serving as translator and strategic advisor as the two species tried to coordinate their very different fighting styles. Human tactics emphasized flexibility and improvisation, while Viridian warfare relied on precise coordination and overwhelming magical power. Engineer Lisa Park and Dr. Rebecca Stone had been working with Viridian technicians to create hybrid weapons that combined human technology with alien energy systems. The new weapons were more powerful than anything either species had developed alone. The planning sessions were difficult because humans and Viridians had very different ideas about military command structure. Jake often found himself mediating disputes between officers who could not understand each other's methods. Shadowfang spent most of his time with Jake now, and seemed to understand that the final battle was approaching. The dragon was restless and eager to fight, but also protective of both Jake and Queen Eliana. The ancient creature sensed that they would all be tested beyond their limits as the Devourer fleet drew closer. Both species began evacuating civilians to safer areas of the system. The human colony ship New Horizon had been repaired using Viridian technology and would serve as an ark for refugees if the battle was lost. Jake realized that his relationship with Queen Eliana had become the foundation for the entire alliance between their species. If anything happened to either of them, the fragile cooperation between humans and Viridians might collapse. The Queen shared his concerns and revealed that she had been having visions of the upcoming battle. In her dreams, she saw great destruction, but also the possibility of victory if the three-way bond between herself, Jake, and Shadowfang could be used properly. The ancient texts spoke of legendary warriors who could channel the power of dragons through psychic bonds, but such abilities had been thought mythical. Until now, Queen Eliana believed that their unique connection might be the key to defeating the Devourers as the enemy fleet approached the final battle. Jake felt the weight of two civilizations resting on his shoulders. The young soldier who had crashed on an alien world was now at the center of the galaxy's last hope for survival. Captain Morgan paced back and forth in the human command tent, trying to understand what had happened to her youngest soldier. Jake Collins had been missing for a week since the Viridian attack ended. As suddenly as it had begun, the aliens had simply stopped fighting and withdrawn to their floating cities above the planet. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez studied the alien communication signals they had intercepted. The messages spoke of something called Devourers that were approaching this sector of space. The humans could not understand most of the Viridian language, but the fear in their voices was unmistakable. Meanwhile, in the Crystal Palace above, Jake was learning about the true scope of the threat facing both species. Queen Eliana showed star charts that revealed the path of destruction left by the Devourer swarm. Hundreds of worlds had fallen to the mechanical creatures over the past century. The Queen explained that Devourers were not truly alive, but were instead machines, created by a long-dead civilization to consume resources. The problem was that they had consumed their creators and everything else in their path, and now wandered the galaxy looking for new worlds to strip bare. Jake watched in horror as the viewing crystals showed him images of Devourer scouts. These mechanical creatures were the size of small ships and moved in perfect formation like insects in a hive. They tore apart everything they encountered and used the materials to build more of themselves. The young soldier realized that his people on Earth had no idea what was coming. The Devourers would eventually reach human space, and when they did, humanity would face the same fate as dozens of other species. Jake knew he had to do something to prevent this catastrophe. Queen Eliana proposed a joint mission to test whether human and Viridian forces could work together. A group of human civilians had been captured by Devourer scouts near the edge of the system and needed to be rescued before the main swarm arrived. Jake volunteered to lead the rescue mission with a mixed force of human soldiers and Viridian warriors. It would be the first time the two species had fought side by side, and everyone was nervous about how well they would cooperate. In battle, Sergeant Kelly Brooks and Corporal Nina Hayes were among the human volunteers who agreed to work with the aliens. They trusted Jake and knew that he would not put them in danger without good reason. The Viridian warriors were led by a stern commander named Thalarin, who had fought the Devourers before. The rescue team assembled on the surface of Vithara, where human soldiers checked their weapons while Viridian warriors prepared their energy staffs. Jake found himself caught between two very different military traditions and had to find ways to make them work together. Shadowfang would provide air support for the mission, and Jake discovered that the Great Dragon was willing to carry him into battle. This shocked both humans and Viridians because the ancient creature had never allowed anyone except Queen Eliana to ride on his back. The captured humans were being held in a Devourer processing facility about 50 kilometers from the main human camp. The mechanical creatures had built the structure in just 2 days using materials stripped from the surrounding landscape. Jake studied the enemy facility through Viridian scrying crystals and developed a battle plan that combined human tactical knowledge with Viridian magical abilities. The humans would provide covering fire while the aliens used their telepathic powers to confuse the Devourer sensors. The mission began at dawn with Shadowfang carrying Jake high above the target area. The dragon breathed silver, fire that melted through the outer defenses while Jake dropped into the facility with a team of human and Viridian soldiers working together. The Devourers were unlike any enemy the humans had ever faced. The mechanical creatures felt no fear or pain and attacked with perfect coordination. Jake had to adapt his tactics quickly as energy beams and mechanical claws tried to tear his team apart. Corporal Nina Hayes found herself fighting alongside a Viridian warrior named Lyra Lai and discovered that their different abilities complemented each other perfectly. The human provided aggressive firepower, while the alien used protective barriers to shield them from enemy attacks. The rescue succeeded beyond all expectations. The mixed human and Viridian team managed to save all 30 captured civilians and destroy the Devourer facility with minimal casualties. Jake felt a surge of hope as he watched the two species working together. Queen Eliana was impressed by the results of the mission and began to believe that an alliance between their peoples might actually be possible. She ordered her military commanders to begin planning joint operations with the human forces back at the human camp. Captain Morgan was amazed when Jake returned, with Viridian escorts. She had assumed he was dead or being held prisoner, but instead he seemed to be serving as some kind of ambassador between the two species. Jake explained the Devourer threat to his fellow humans and convinced them that working with the Viridians was their only hope for survival. Captain Morgan was reluctant to trust the aliens, but the evidence Jake presented was too compelling to ignore. Engineer Lisa Park and Dr. Rebecca Stone began meeting with Viridian technicians to discuss ways of combining human technology with alien science. The cultural differences were enormous, but both sides were motivated by the approaching threat. The alliance between humans and Viridians grew stronger each day as more joint missions Succeeded against Devourer scouts, Jake found himself spending more time with Queen Ileana and began to understand the terrible burden she carried as leader of her people. The Queen had watched countless worlds fall to the Devourers and blamed herself for not finding a solution sooner. She saw the alliance with humanity as perhaps her last chance to save what remained of galactic civilization. Shadowfang continued to show unusual interest in Jake, and the dragons seemed to understand that the young human was crucial to their survival. The ancient creature would follow Jake into battle without hesitation, something that amazed even Queen Ileana as reports came in of the main Devourer swarm approaching the system. Both species began, preparing for what might be their final battle. The alliance was still fragile and untested, but it represented hope in the face of overwhelming darkness. Jake realized that he had become far more than just a soldier. He was now a bridge between two species that might be the galaxy's last hope against an enemy that had never been defeated. The young man who had crashed on an alien world just weeks ago now carried the fate of both civilizations on his shoulders. The battle between humans and Viridians raged for 3 days and nights. Jake Collins fought alongside his fellow soldiers as energy beams tore through the air around them. The alien weapons were far more advanced than anything Earth had ever produced, and the human defenses crumbled under the relentless assault. Captain Morgan ordered her forces to fall back to a more defensible position, but the Viridians had air superiority with their dragon riders. The massive creatures swooped down from above, breathing streams of silver fire that melted human weapons and armor. Jake watched in horror as his friends were overwhelmed by the alien assault. On the third night, the Viridians launched a devastating attack on the human camp Jake was helping. Wounded civilians escaped when he heard screams coming from the medical tent. Children and elderly colonists were trapped inside, as Viridian warriors surrounded the structure with weapons drawn. Without thinking, Jake ran toward the medical tent even, though he knew it was probably suicide. He could not stand by and watch innocent people die when he might be able to help them. His fellow soldiers shouted for him to come back, but he ignored their calls and charged into the enemy lines. Jake fought his way through several Viridian warriors before reaching the medical tent. But there were too many enemies and his ammunition was running low. An energy beam struck him in the shoulder and he fell to the ground in pain. As darkness closed in around him, he saw Queen Ileana approaching with Shadowfang at her side. When Jake woke up, he found himself lying on a bed made of crystal in the most beautiful room he had ever seen. The walls were transparent and showed a view of stars and nebulae that seemed impossibly close. Floating islands drifted past the windows with waterfalls that flowed upward into the Sky Queen. Ileana sat nearby, watching him with those violet eyes that seemed to see into his very soul. She explained that he was aboard her floating palace high above the planet where the battle still continued. His wound had been healed using Viridian medicine that was far beyond human understanding. The Queen told Jake that she had been searching the galaxy for someone like him. For over 500 years, most species they encountered were either too primitive or too advanced to be useful. But humans possessed a unique quality that fascinated her. She called it the untamed fire and said it burned brighter in him than in any other human. Jake demanded to know why she had taken him and what she wanted with him. The Queen smiled and explained that her people were not really conquerors, but refugees fleeing from something far worse than any war between species. A great darkness was approaching that would destroy everything in its path. She showed Jake images through a crystal viewing device of worlds that had been completely stripped of all life. Mechanical creatures called Devourers had consumed entire planets, leaving behind only empty husks of rock and metal. The Viridian Empire had been retreating across the galaxy for decades, unable to find a way to stop the swarm. The Queen believed that humans might hold the key to defeating the Devourers, because they possessed something her people had lost long ago: the ability to adapt and improvise in desperate situations. She needed someone who could think like a human, but also understand Viridian technology and magic. Jake was skeptical of her claims, but the images she showed him were too detailed to be fake. He could see the devastation left behind by the Devourers and understood why the Queen was so desperate to find a solution. The mechanical swarm would eventually reach this sector of the galaxy and destroy both humans and Viridians. As they talked, Shadowfang entered the chamber and approached Jake slowly. The great dragon had never allowed anyone except the queen to come near him. But something about this human was different. Jake felt drawn to the magnificent creature and reached out to touch the smooth scales on his snout. The dragon did not pull away but instead seemed to enjoy the contact. This surprised Queen Eliana more than anything else that had happened since the humans arrived. Shadowfang was ancient and wise, and his acceptance of Jake confirmed her belief that this young soldier was special. Jake learned that the queen had been alive for over 2,000 years and had seen the rise and fall of countless civilizations. She had grown weary of war and destruction, but the approaching devourer swarm had given her new purpose. She would do whatever was necessary to save both their species from extinction. The queen offered Jake a choice: he could remain her prisoner and watch his people die in the war below, or he could help her find a way to unite humans and Viridians against the greater threat that was coming. She promised that if he helped her, she would spare the human colonists and give them a place in her empire. Jake thought about his friends fighting and dying on the planet below. He knew that Captain Morgan would never surrender and that the humans would fight to the last person, unless something changed. His people were brave, but they were also outnumbered and outgunned by the Viridian forces. The young soldier made his decision and agreed to help Queen Eliana, but only if she would call off the attack on his people immediately. She smiled and sent word to her forces to cease hostilities. The war between humans and Viridians ended as suddenly as it had begun. Queen Eliana began teaching Jake about Viridian history and culture, while Shadowfang became his constant companion. The dragon seemed to understand that Jake was important to their survival and protected him from other Viridians who did not trust the human presence in their sacred palace. As days passed, Jake began to understand the complexity of the situation. The Viridians were an ancient and proud people who had ruled this part of the galaxy for millennia. But the devourer threat had humbled them and forced them to consider options they never would have accepted before. The queen revealed that her people possessed powerful telepathic abilities that allowed them to communicate without words and to influence the minds of other species. But humans seemed to be naturally resistant to these powers, which both frustrated and intrigued the Viridians. Jake realized that his capture might be the key to saving both species from destruction. If humans and Viridians could work together, they might have a chance against the devourers. But first, they would have to overcome centuries of mistrust and fear. The young soldier found himself at the center of an alliance that could determine the fate of the galaxy. The massive colony ship New Horizons shook violently as it fell through the alien atmosphere of planet Vithera. Jake Collins gripped his weapon tighter as the transport crashed into the purple ground with a thunderous roar. Metal twisted and screamed around him as 200 human colonists fought to survive the impact. Captain Lisa Morgan shouted orders over the chaos while her soldiers pulled wounded civilians from the wreckage. Jake was only 19 years old and the youngest soldier in the unit, but he moved quickly to help others escape the burning ship. Smoke filled the air as they dragged supplies and injured people away from the crash site. The alien world around them was beautiful, but strange. Purple grass covered rolling hills. Under a sky with two suns, crystal formations jutted from the ground like frozen lightning trees with silver leaves swayed in the warm breeze. But something felt wrong about this place. Jake could sense unseen eyes watching them from the shadows. Lieutenant Amy Rodriguez organized the survivors into groups while Sergeant Kelly Brooks and Corporal Nina Hayes set up defensive positions around their makeshift camp. They had lost contact with Earth and their ship was too damaged to fly again. They were stranded on this mysterious planet with limited supplies and no way home. On the third day the aliens came. Jake was on guard duty when he saw them approaching across the plains. At first he thought they were human, but as they got closer, he realized these beings were something else entirely. They moved with impossible grace and their skins seemed to glow with inner light. The alien warriors rode on the backs of flying creatures that looked like dragons from old Earth stories. The dragons were massive with scales that shifted color from blue to silver. Their wings created shadows on the ground as they circled overhead. The riders were tall and elegant with pointed ears and violet eyes that seemed to see right through a person. Captain Morgan ordered her soldiers to form a defensive line as the aliens landed nearby. Jake stood with his fellow soldiers watching, as the most beautiful and terrifying being he had ever seen stepped forward from the group. She was clearly their leader, and commanded respect from all who looked upon her. Queen Aliana Starweaver was her name, though the humans did not know this yet. Her silver hair flowed like liquid moonlight, and her pale skin glowed with an ethereal radiance. She wore armor that looked like it was made from crystallized starlight, and her eyes held the wisdom of countless centuries. Beside her prowled a dragon larger than all the others. Its scales were midnight blue that shifted to silver when the light hit them just right. The creature was called Shadowfang, and it had been the queen's companion for over 1,000 years. The dragon watched the humans with intelligent eyes that seemed almost human in their depth. The queen spoke in a voice that carried across the battlefield, like music made of wind chimes. Her words were in the human language, though she had never heard it before. Telepathic abilities allowed her people to understand and speak any tongue. The humans were surprised to hear their own language spoken so perfectly by this alien being. She offered the humans a choice: surrender their advanced weapons and technology, or face the consequences of defying the Viridian Empire. The humans had crash-landed in territory that belonged to her people, and they would follow Viridian law or be destroyed. Captain Morgan stood firm and refused to give up their weapons. The Queen seemed amused by the human defiance. Most species in the galaxy bowed before Viridian power without question, but these small beings showed no fear even when faced with creatures that could destroy them with ease. She had expected them to surrender immediately, but instead they prepared to fight, as tensions rose between the two groups. Queen Aliana studied the human soldiers with growing interest. Their minds were different from other species she had encountered. They possessed a burning intensity that reminded her of stars about to explode. There was something special about these beings, though she could not yet understand what it was. Her gaze moved from soldier to soldier until it fell upon young Jake Collins. He stood with his weapon ready, but there was something in his eyes that caught her attention. While the other humans showed fear, mixed with determination, this young one burned with pure courage that reminded her of ancient legends. Jake felt the alien queen's eyes upon him and looked back at her without flinching. Most people would have been terrified to meet the gaze of such a powerful being. But Jake had never backed down from anything in his life. He stared into those violet eyes and saw something that surprised him. Curiosity. The queen sensed something extraordinary in this young human soldier. His mind blazed with untamed fire that called to something deep within her ancient soul. She had been searching the galaxy for centuries for someone like him, though she had not known what she was looking for until this moment. Shadowfang the great dragon also seemed interested in Jake. The ancient creature had never shown interest in any being other than his queen, but something about this human was different. The dragon moved closer to get a better look at the young soldier. While the other humans stepped back in fear, Queen Aliana raised one elegant hand and pointed directly at Jake Collins. Her voice carried absolute authority as she spoke words that would change the fate of both their species forever. She declared that this young human belonged with her and would come with her. When she left this place, the human soldiers raised their weapons in response to this declaration, but the queen showed no concern for their threats. She had made her decision, and none would stand against her will. Jake belonged with her now, and she would have him no matter what the cost might be. Captain Morgan shouted that no soldier under her command would be taken by aliens, but Queen Aliana simply smiled. The first battle between humans and Viridians was about to begin, and at the center of it all stood one young soldier whose destiny had just been claimed by an alien queen.